So I noticed that I wasn't happy, and it kind of was a feeling that grew. Like it started small. I started noticing things. It's interesting. They talk a lot about the law of attraction. So when you notice something good about something, you're going to start noticing more, and you're going to look for the good and notice more of the good. In this case with my business, I was noticing I was unhappy with just doing the job as it was.
Hey, my friends, this is Nishant, and welcome to the Nishant Garg Show. This is a podcast about helping you live a fulfilled life. The mission of the show is to spread mindfulness awareness, and my job on the show is to invite world-class experts to extract the practices, routines, and habits to help you live a fulfilled and abundant life. Today's guest is Megan Murphy. Megan is a women's empowerment coach, business mentor, kindness activist, meditation instructor, and lecturer. Megan thinks kindness rocks. She is the creator of the national movement, the Kindness Rocks Project, which encourages people to leave rocks painted with inspiring messages along the path of life. Megan loves to share her story and inspire others to cultivate and express kindness. In this episode, Megan discusses that. How to remove internal blocks to find the answers, how to find the inner truth, self-awareness, letting go of negative self-talk, mindfulness and meditation, and much, much more. Some of the people mentioned in this episode are Elizabeth Gilbert, Robin Williams, Brené Brown, Oprah, and more. So now let the episode begin. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure, and I'm so excited to have you on the show and looking forward to have a kind, compassionate conversation with you.
Absolutely.
When I was going through your profile, I was doing some research. I found that you are the founder of Kindness Rock Project. When I saw that rock, my first instinct was, it's kind of a rock band, maybe Kindness Rocks. We all say that it rocks, you rock. But later I realized it's not that rock. It's the rock that we find by the beach.
Yes, it's both.
Can we start with the origin of your Kindness Rock Project? How did it happen, and what was your motivation with that?
Sure. Well, I had been going through one of those turbulent moments in my own life where I was at a crossroads. I had recently given up my business that I had spent 15 years building, and I was walking away from it, not because it wasn't successful. That business was like a child. I grew it and I, nurtured it along. But along the way, I lost my joy in doing the work that I was doing. And so my definition of success had changed. And so I felt this inner turmoil. And I thought, oh my gosh, all I want to do is be happy. And this is the source of making me unhappy at this point. There's got to be something more purposeful in my life that I could be doing. So I gave up that business, and I found myself doing what I hadn't done for those years prior because I was working so much as an entrepreneur. We put our blood, sweat, and tears into our business. And rarely did I take time, to even walk the beach. And so I just began walking the beach. And what I realized was that, I was seeking something. And what I realized was that I was grieving my business, the loss of my business, which was my choice, but yet it was still a loss. And I was also grieving the loss of my parents who had passed away 21 years prior. And so what happens is that often when we finally stop and we, release the noise and we become self-aware, I realize that, grief follows us. It stays within us and it surfaces at one point or another. And so I found myself on that beach grieving this greater loss, and I was confused and surprised. And to be honest with you, I was a little like judgmental to myself because I thought, well, this is crazy. Like, this is 21 years later. What are you doing? And yet at that moment, I would walk the beach and I would look for signs and messages from my mom and dad. So I started having conversations with them in heaven, and I'd say, geez, I'm looking for some insider help. Like, is this the next thing I should be doing? And so I'd look for things like sea glass or piece of sea glass or heart-shaped rocks. And I saw those as signs from them. And it was almost magical. Like every time I would ask for one, it would just wash ashore right in front of me. And so it was this magical game I was playing. And I felt supported, and I felt, geez, I can't let anybody know that I'm doing this. I'm a middle-aged woman and this is crazy, but it makes me feel so happy. And then I noticed the other people that were walking on the beach, and many of them, Nishant, looked the same way I did. Like they weren't really aware that someone else was on the beach. They may have looked like they were contemplating something or sad, and I would say hello, and they wouldn't say hello back most of the time. And I thought, oh, that's okay, because it looks like they're going through something, right? They're not trying to be mean. They're just, they're doing what I've been doing. Like they're in their own heads. And so one day I brought a Sharpie magic marker in my pocket because, backstory for this, the beach is about 2 miles from my home. And the walk, I do a loop, it's about 6 miles. So when I walk this in the winter months, I fill my pockets with like a good Girl Scout would. I have, my phone and my glasses and Kleenex and snacks. And, for some reason there was a Sharpie marker on the counter and I threw it in. And when I got to the beach, I reached in my pocket and I thought, I could write some messages on some rocks, and maybe just like my heart rocks or sea glass, this would be a message or a sign for someone who needs it. And so that's when the project really began. And I just want to share with you that on that very first day, I want the listeners to understand, I need to paint the picture for them. I walk 1.5 miles on the beach directly, and there are millions of rocks on this beach. So if any of you can imagine, just a beach filled with all different size and colored rocks, and, they crunch under your feet as you walk. And so finding one of the 5 rocks on that 1.5 mile stretch of beach would have been like a needle in a haystack. And, I wasn't attached to the outcome. I just wanted to leave the messages. It was like a healing for myself. And my friend found one of those rocks that night and texted me a picture of it and said, "Did you leave this rock on the beach today?" And
I actually wanted to ask that. So I'm glad that you're already covering that.
Yeah. So, and I thought like, oh my gosh, I've been found out. How would she know that? But, we had been in life coach training together, and I did a project about walking the beach and finding heart rocks. So I think she put 2 and 2 together, but I was nervous to let her know my secret. So I said, no, I didn't. Not me, but that's really great that someone did that. And what she said next was that if it was you, I just want to let you know that I was having a really bad day. And your rock, turned my day around and it made me feel better.
Do you remember the messages you wrote on those 5 rocks?
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. They were very simple. They were basically like, you've got this, and the answer lies within, and believe in yourself. Very simple messages, Nishant, messages that I would want myself. If I was going through a bad day and I found that message, it could have so many different meanings for different people going through whatever they're going through. So they were very simple, just 2 or 3 words. And I would hope that they would help somebody.
Yes, they are simple messages. And I would like to say that sometimes we need external validation and external encouragement when we are in our low moments. You got this. Believe in yourself. We need somebody, some family member, some friend, some support system to tell us that you can do this when we our belief starts to shake.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I was looking for that validation from my mom and dad who were deceased, right? And I was thinking that, well, if they show me a sign or a message, then, that must be true. And what I found out over time was that really the messages and the answers lied within me. So getting external validation is wonderful, but really it's just amplifying a message that we all have, which is our own truths that lie deep within us.
I would love to ask you, Megan, that if we have all the answers within us, then why can't we find the great answers when we need them the most? What is it that's blocking us to find those answers?
Oh, that's another great question. Well, I truly believe that, we have so much as human beings that we are habitual patterns, right? Neuroscientists they study this all the time. We have these grooves in our brain, these habitual patterns. And what happens is that we fall into these roles. So we may believe things about ourselves from our childhood. I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or whatever it is that you believe that holds you back, and you carry that with you throughout life. I know that I know that everybody I work with as coaching
Everybody
clients.
has.
Yes, absolutely. Coupled with the fact that as human beings, researchers say that we have 80,000 thoughts a day, and that 80% of these thoughts are negative, which is what they discuss as a negative bias. And so that negative bias is towards ourselves or towards others or towards the world around us. And so it sounds all very exhausting. And so with all of that happening inside of us, those habitual, patterns that we fall back into, and also with all those negative thoughts swirling around, obviously it's difficult for us to really tap into that inner truth, that lies within each of us. But there's ways to do it. There's good news. There's ways that we can do that. But uncovering that is a process, and it all begins with self-awareness, I believe.
Would you please explain more on those ways to get into our inner truth and find those great answers that we already have? If any practice or any tools, tactics that comes to your mind or you apply in your life every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So mindfulness is really important in my life personally. And the Kindness Rocks project, it turns out, is a great activity for that, which, again, I never set out to create this project. I truly believe that I was chosen just to be the hands on earth to provide it for people at a time that they need it the most. So it begins with self-awareness. And how do we know? Like, what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is, for me, it happened back to my business example, that I was noticing in my life that there was a shift, that I was no longer enjoying things that I had enjoyed before. My definition of success had changed. And how I realized this was that I found myself being unhappy. I didn't like the person that I saw in the mirror, not physically, but just emotionally. I felt like I had moved away from myself. And so it was a feeling that I really didn't understand, and I was confused by it, but I wanted to dig more into it. And so I just paid attention. And on that very first walk on the beach that day, I made myself really present to being on that walk. I took a big, deep breath of fresh air, and I just allowed the thoughts to leave my head, and I focused on just the simplicity of breathing the air in and out, smelling the salty air, feeling the sand beneath my feet. And so that's the process. When we can get rid of the thoughts, I mean, they're still going to be there, but if we practice mindfulness and if we take the time to be quiet, we can uncover that inner truth within us. The next thing that's really important in this journey is, like, don't be judgmental of yourself, because, again, the 80% of our thoughts are negative towards ourselves. So in this example, if I would say to a client or something, you should practice mindfulness and meditation, that could help. And many times people will say, well, I've tried to meditate. I can't do that. I can't shut down my mind. And it's like, you can't or you won't try. There's a difference. So if you want change in your life, we all have to participate in it ourselves.
This is a powerful thing that you just mentioned. Taking a pause, finding some quiet time. Sometimes we become so busy in our day-to-day life that we forget to really take a break from the life sometimes. And if I understand correctly, when you were walking on the beach, you found that you were breathing in, you were basically breathing in the life, and then you got into self-awareness. We already have awareness. There are so many layers that we create on top of that awareness, our self-discovery.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the very first, that's the most important tool is number one, leaning into that self-awareness, getting quiet. And part of that quiet process I have found is the best tool to use is meditation. It can help in so many ways.
What does your meditation practice look like these days?
Oh, that's another great question. I'm so glad that you asked that, because many people, have these judgments around meditation. They think that you need to be sitting on a cushion with your legs crossed, and your eyes closed. I personally do walking meditations on the beach. And so what I do is I have this whole routine. I'm going to share it with you because maybe it will help a listener. So again, it's a 6-mile walk that I take. So the first leg of my walk, I listen to either an audiobook that's uplifting or a podcast, something that just really intrigues me, where I'm entertained as well as educated. And then when I get to the beach, I take my headphones off and I do mindful walking. So I do what I described earlier, where I just simply breathe in the fresh air in and out of my nose, and I walk slowly. And every time that a thought enters my mind, I just say, thinking. And then I take another deep breath and I let it go. And so I do this for about a mile down the beach. And it's very helpful because, oftentimes I will say, geez, I've had so many thoughts today on any given day. And every time that I bring myself back to the breath, I'm actually flexing a muscle, my resiliency muscle in my brain, right? That's what builds the neuroplasticity in our brains, is that we think we're bad at it because we're having so many thoughts, where that is the process. That's the workout right there. So some days I have a great workout in my brain through that walking meditation. And other days I have less thoughts. And I think, wow, that was lovely,
Yeah. You mentioned that you put on some audible books or you listen to some podcasts, but when you go to, or when you reach the beach, you just take everything off. You just breathe and do some walking meditation. I would love to ask you, what kind of books, audible books or podcasts do you listen to?
Oh, so many. I have a big list.
Top 3.
Okay, top 3. I love Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. That's one of my favorite books. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That is a wonderful book it's my go-to. I always go back to that book. It was written so many years ago, but the wisdom is amazing. The Alchemist, one of my all-time favorite books by Paulo Coelho. For podcasts, I love The Moth. People don't understand when I say that The Moth. It's MOTH. Yes, it's The Moth, like a moth that flies, by NPR. I have my own podcast, so I listen to that sometimes because listening to it after recording is important because it's a totally different perspective. And I also love meditation. So Deepak Chopra and Oprah have a meditation that they, put out quarterly. And I'm a big fan of that 21-day meditation as well.
What's your podcast name? Would you tell us to our listeners?
It's Conversations.
Conversation, not conversation.
Right. Conversation.
What's the difference between conversation and kind conversation?
Yeah. Well, I think it just amplifies. In a conversation, it's two people speaking to one another, right? And it's implied that we're listening. But with a kind conversation, I believe it's amplified. So we take more time to listen to the other person's perspective and point of view. We're not trying to fill the empty space with nonsense. We hold the space for others.
Would you say that we are having a kind conversation without any bias or without any judgment?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How can we practice that? Is there a specific practice or tools that we can try in our life?
Yeah, so it goes back to self-awareness. So everything heads back to self-awareness.
That's the
So,
root.
yeah, so I would say next time that any of the listeners or you or I are in a conversation with someone, just notice like how you're showing up in that conversation. Are you nervously talking? Are you really listening, or are you thinking about the next thing that you're going to say? Are you showing up authentically and sharing your authentic voice? I feel that's a really important one because so many of us right now in this divided world are fearful of, maybe disagreeing with somebody in a positive way, like just saying, okay, I understand that you feel the way you do, and this is how I feel. And those are opportunities for us to learn and grow. Really, it's not to be seen as a negative. So I would challenge everybody that's listening to just pay attention to the next conversation that they have and what's going on for them.
In terms of self-awareness, do you feel that our childhood trauma or anything that happened to us in our childhood can stop us or can hinder our progress in our life?
Well, I think if we don't pay attention to it, right? I mean, I think there's many people, I'm not a therapist, but I think there's many people that have had childhood trauma that they're not even aware of the extent of its effects on them and why they are the way they are. That's why therapy is so important for so many people. I think, though, that we've all had on a smaller scale, different traumas. It could be as simple as, and I'll just use an example for me because this is a silly example, but it was really meaningful for me. There was a boy that used to get bullied in my class when I was in elementary school. And the bully was this big, big kid. And everybody was afraid of him. And I would go to school and feel so sad as he chased this little boy around the playground, making fun of him and tripping him and just ridiculing him. And everybody would stand around and laugh. And I was a chubby girl growing up, and I didn't want to stand up against the bully because I felt like, oh no, I was a chubby girl and the last thing I wanted was any attention. I didn't want him to, put his anger and bullying on me. And so I didn't say anything. And that's something that sits with me today. It's one of my regrets. And is it trauma? For me, it's a little bit of trauma. I feel that now having this platform that I do, it's my responsibility to educate people about, kindness and compassion and speaking up for people.
Yes, kindness and compassion will always rock. I'd like to ask you that in your Kindness Rock project, how did you come up with this project name Kindness? It could have been some different word. Let's say Compassion Rock project, Mindfulness Rock project. How did you come up with this specific kind word?
So kindness came about because the process for me, the journey for me was that I needed to be kinder to myself. And when I shared an act of kindness with someone else, with the rock, I saw it as an act of kindness. That just, it just came to me one day. It was like, this is the Kindness Rocks project. And it has two meanings. Kindness rocks. It's great. And also it's, kindness rocks. But I tell people often, I remind them, right? So when we started, you asked me what my intention was. And intentions are so important. They're so powerful, and intentions keep us on the mark of what we're doing. And so it's really not about the rock, right? So my intention was to reach out to another struggling soul to let them know that they weren't alone. I like to call it the art of connecting. And so that, with that being the intention, there's all sorts of ways that I can do that. This project, though, has given me a voice and a means because it's a simple act of painting on a rock. So we can start people there with that little act of painting on a rock, and then we can expand upon what it means in terms of community and in terms of our world at large.
I'm having this question in my head right now. Was there any instance in your life that you were not kind to yourself or kind to others? You realized that, okay, you're not being kinder, and you did something, or you practiced some tools or tactics, and then you were on the path of being kind. If any instance comes to your mind.
Yeah. So basically, when I was leaving my business, right, I was not kind to myself at all. I was beating myself up. I had this.
What do you say, negative self-talk?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was this duality of, who do you think you are? And you can't quit. And look, you didn't achieve all that you wanted to, keep going. Like, you've invested 15 years in this. Why are you walking away? You'll never be successful again. You've reached success for this. Why are you stopping? All sorts of things. And what happened was that I took that out on myself and on my family and on my friends. And, I didn't recognize who I was because I was always having this internal struggle. And it's interesting because, again, back walking on the beach and those people not really smiling at me, how many people are walking around having this internal struggle and they're not paying attention or being mindful or present to where they are? I believe that's a pandemic. I think that the majority of people that we come across is so stuck in their own heads and their own problems and their own, negative self-talk that they rarely pay attention, to what's happening for others.
And by default, we tend to judge them. We are smiling and they are not smiling back. They are rude. Maybe they are stuck in their own head.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that old adage that, we never know the struggles that someone else is having is so true. It's so true. When you look at some of the famous people who have, taken their own lives, for example, Robin Williams, who is this brilliant comedian that made so many people happy and smile and laugh. And nobody knew that he was just tormented, right? He was personally tormented and was sad. And what a shame,
It can be. This is interesting. I was listening to Dr. Gabor Mate. I'm not sure if you know him. So he's addiction expert in the world. He talks about that there is a correlation between creation and sensitivity. A lot of creative people who are high achievers, high performers, there is some suffering always inside, and those suffering, those addiction arises from our childhood, unresolved trauma or any unresolved thing from the childhood.
Yeah. Well, I am not familiar with that work, but I know personally that that's true. For me, on the outside, being the Kindness Rocks Project founder, so many people, when they meet me, they're like, I can't believe I'm meeting you. Like, they put me on this pedestal that I do not belong to be on. I'm just like them. On any given day, I have my personal struggles. And so again, there's this feeling of, no, we're alike. And I don't want that attention. I don't want people to say, oh, I want to be just like you, or, oh, you're, they aspire. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure for a human being.
How do you practice kindness? So let's say if you are meeting somebody in your life, could be in your personal life or professional life, how do you practice being kinder towards others? I'm curious to ask you, do you ask any specific thing to them, or what do you do?
Well, number one, I am fully present with them. So I look them in the eye. I may touch them on the sleeve. I listen wholeheartedly. So there's a difference between listening to someone and listening wholeheartedly. So I believe the difference is that, wholeheartedness is we hear the words, we feel the emotions, and we have compassion for whatever their experience is. Even if we don't understand it, because we all have different experiences, but we put ourselves in their place, in their position, and we just, and again, Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors. I should have mentioned her. And she talks about shame and resilience and vulnerability. And, we don't say, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, right? We just say, I hear you.
It does make a lot of difference, big difference. I hear you.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I'm wanting to ask you that, and let's go back to your business part, that you were into your business for 15 years. It's common that we human beings get stuck into doing things, and then we have fear of failure, fear of rejection, of trying new things in our life. When we feel that this thing or this business or this job is not serving us, we are not happy in that, we want something new. How was your transition happened? I'm curious to know, because this is very important. We are all transitioning from one thing to another in our life. Even from in age, we have different transitions from one age group to another age group. And in our profession, how did that transition happen? When did you decide that you want to quit your business?
Yeah, so I noticed that just I wasn't happy, and it kind of was a feeling that grew. Like it started small. I started noticing things. It's interesting, they talk a lot about the law of attraction. So when you notice something good about something, you're going to start noticing more, and you're going to look for the good and notice more of the good. In this case with my business, I was noticing I was unhappy with just doing the job as it was. And again, it was really successful. I was at the most successful state when I left. But what happened is I started noticing little things that just were off for me, that I'm like, oh, I just no longer like doing this. And so that kind of snowballed. I think
Would you mind telling some of those things that you didn't like?
Yeah, so it was really, it was challenging. I had a chain of retail stores. So I had 3 retail stores by the time that I, was ready to jump ship. And, that entails a lot of employees. The business that I was in, I live in a vacation spot. And so all of my business had to be done in 8 weeks period of time. And everything that I sold was under $25. So the volume of sales in that 8 weeks, and we were doing, a lot of sales, was just, the workload was horrific. And I noticed with my employees that I was short with them. I had no longer people matter to me a lot. Relationships matter. And, I was finding my way to be just annoyed with things, and I was short with people, and I found myself being like, I'll just do it myself, and that was something that that was far from who I truly am. I mean, if you look at the project now, this isn't about me. This is about me opening my arms to everyone and saying, here, go do this in your neighborhood. How can I support you? And let's have a conversation. People reach out to me from around the world, and I'm fully present with them. I answer every single email and message through social media. And there's probably about 1 million people in this project now around the world with all the different rock groups. And I receive hundreds of messages a day, and I'm there for them. That's what I enjoy. And so that's where I had lost my way, in my business.
I love how you explain that. Sometimes, it's a phase. We enjoy that phase, and sometimes it just run its course. We gotta let it go, and letting go is difficult. We get attached to things, and including me, I get attached to things, and letting it go, we have those grief. And as you mentioned in our conversation in the beginning, that you had grief for your business.
Yeah. And it's interesting because letting go can be really difficult, even if, right? Let's say it's a relationship or a career or anything, a home that you grew up in and you want to sell it and move on, like letting go of anything
Why does it
is,
happen that letting go is there's books galore on letting go of attachment, but why we human beings are we hardwired for that?
yeah, I believe that we are. Well, if you go back again to the beginnings of mindfulness and you think about, as human beings, we're looking for safety, right? Like that's one of the major innate things that as human beings that we need is safety. And once we feel safe, then we can kind of let our guard down. And so these habitual things, these habitual patterns, like, the old saying, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. There's a lot of different like little sayings about that. And when you really think about those things that we've just said, there's so much truth to them. Like, so we fear the unknown.
Yes. And I'm curious to ask you that if you are in a social gathering and somebody asks you, Megan, what do you do? How would you explain?
What I do?
Yeah.
I always say, well, it's a very long story. Do you have a
A
minute?
brief. Okay.
Yeah, because it's very difficult to be like, well, I started a movement. I mean, people just look at me funny, like, what? And I said, yeah, it's a grassroots kindness movement. And, I just facilitate it now. This movement is, just amazing, but it's not by me, it's by the energy of many. All I do is organize and facilitate it, and to the best of my ability. But yeah, so it's very difficult to answer that question.
Maybe. How's your kindness rock project serving during Corona times and during this racism times, whatever is happening in 2020?
Yeah, it's been a great tool for people. So this project has so many health benefits. And it's interesting because I get Google alerts that come into my email every time the project is mentioned. And so typically on any day, there's 3 to 4 news stories around the world about Kindness Rocks Project. And the last one that I saw was on shondaland.com, and it was written by a psychiatrist about the benefits of the rock painting and how it's healing, and through art therapy and mindfulness and, being quiet and being creative. But in addition to that, adding the kindness component is so powerful. So during the coronavirus and people couldn't really go out to places, this was an activity that families could sit down and do, and they could, paint with each other, and they could have conversations about what message would you like to find, or, really opening up this dialogue that families have been so busy that they hardly sit around a table together, never mind doing arts and craft. It's really opened up this new way for them to connect. And one of the things I found very interesting, Nishant, is that, when schools closed, many of the schools here in the United States have cut their budgets so much. And what they cut out of their budgets were art programs and music programs and phys ed programs. And yet what happened when these kids had to stay home and do homeschooling? All of the educators were focusing on art and, kindness and community and getting outside and walking and getting exercise, which all of these things are part of what this project is about.
With this kindness, what can we change in the world?
Oh gosh, it's just a starting point. I think there needs to be a emphasis for our children. Number one, we really can make an impact with our kids by swimming, upstream and teaching them with social emotional learning programs in school. Because if we raise our children to be kinder, if we put that time and energy in now, as opposed to like, achieving all A's, right? Like I think the past years has been this competition between kids and their grades and getting into these certain schools and programs and AP courses. And what we're finding out now is that unless the child is balanced and has an overall well-being, they will never fully achieve their potential because certain things could hold them back, right? That social emotional
True.
component is so important.
Kindness may sound scary to a lot of people, but actually we practice this kindness. Everybody practices every single day, but just, I think when we genuinely smile to somebody, when we say hello genuinely, then it's a kind act. It's
Absolutely.
not something unique or something that we have to learn. It's just a practice that we gotta do it.
Absolutely. And I do believe that kindness and compassion are intertwined. So,
How
so,
is that?
so basically, we may not understand somebody else's journey, right? So, if we're talking about all of the issues with racism right now happening in the world, we may not understand someone else's journey, but we can understand the emotions behind why they feel the way they do.
Empathy matters.
Yes. But when we take that stand and say, I can't fully understand, but I'm here for you and I will support you. That is really powerful and important.
And that's what Bernie Brown says, that yes, I haven't been there in that situation, but I can hear you. I can feel your emotions, but I haven't been there. You don't have to experience everything to be
Yeah,
with somebody.
absolutely. And so I do a lot of work on perspective building because, as you and I even having this conversation, we're viewing this conversation very differently because we come from different backgrounds and different upbringings and we've had different experiences. So we have different lenses through which we see.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think when people understand that, it's less challenging in relationship building because you understand, oh, well, they're just different than me. And so it's understandable that maybe we don't see eye to eye because we're different.
Exactly. And we all are same at the core. At the
Yeah.
core level, all human beings are same. In fact, if you talk about neuroscience, 99.99%, every human brain is same. What differs is 0.01%. Our brain works similar 99.99%. And in 0.01, the entire equation changes.
Yeah.
I want to ask you that, is there any quote that you live your life by, or any quote that inspires you the most?
Well, there's so many quotes. A moment can change a day can change a life, and one life can change the world. That is a Gandhi quote, and that's one of my most powerful quotes. And then my other quote, I have to give you two because this one came to me when I was walking on the beach. I think I mentioned that, I didn't create this project. I feel as if I was blessed to have paid attention to the energy that was swirling around me. And this project wanted to be created. And when it came into my awareness, I said, okay, I'll do it. I've got nothing else going on. But so one of those days, every day I have these conversations like, okay, I'm doing this. Like, what else do you want me to do? And one day the message came to me, which is the tagline of the project, and it's very powerful. And that is, one message at just the right moment can change someone's entire day, outlook, or life.
Did you create this movement while you were working at your retail business, or did you quit that business? How did it happen?
Yeah, no, it was after that business. I actually handed it over. I had a business partner at the time, handed it to her and just walked away. I did do a year journey before I started the project. I was fortunate to have met Oprah, and she gave me some great wisdom where she said, be in service of others and you'll find, your next thing. And I remember when she said that, it just was like a bolt of lightning went
Wow.
through my body. And then I took a trip to India and with my daughter to Dharamshala, in the north, and we taught English for a month there, and I did a lot of hiking and traveling. And every time when I was in India, it was a really strange experience, but I kept feeling like I was supposed to be holding a picture of something, holding something to take a picture of it. And I kept saying to my daughter, like, I'm supposed to be taking pictures of something. And she's like, Mom, what are you talking about? I'm like, I have no idea. And then I returned home, and shortly after, that's when that happened on the beach with my Sharpie, and then it makes all the sense in the world because now all I do is take pictures of rocks.
In the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that your personal definition of success had got changed. Would you mind telling us what used to be your definition of success, and now, when you had started this project, what's your definition of success?
Yeah, great question. So when I started my business, I believe my intention was off, right? So back to intention. I was trying to prove myself. And so in that, I grew up in a family that wasn't wealthy. My parents struggled, and I always felt like I was the poorest kid in the class. But my parents did an amazing job to really not let us know that they were struggling. But kids can sense things. So I basically started that business to prove that I could be financially successful. When in reality, success for me, like I proved that. And then once you prove that, then what? Right? Like you're standing there with a bunch of money and what does that mean? Like when you achieve what you think is your goal, and then you're looking around going like, okay, well, that's it.
Do you think it all comes down to the meaning in life? That
Yeah.
goals come and goes?
Yeah, and you're kind of like, okay, well, this isn't making me happy, and maybe my intention was off, and maybe I've proved to myself, now what's next? Like I just want to so my intention changed where it's really I want to make a difference in the world. Like at the end of my life, what are people going to say? What's going to be my legacy?
Exactly. And I'm having this great thing in my head, and I want to ask you for sure that people have this thing that we want to try something new, but something is holding us back to try, maybe because of fear or anything else. What qualities or how should somebody practice to transit from one thing to another? What qualities they should have, or anything, if you can recommend to us?
Yeah, well, really, they need to question, like, how true is this, right? So fear is based in either a judgment or an assumption, or an interpretation that we have. In my coaching, I went to coach training school in that year also after I went to India. And I learned all about this, not so that I could coach people, but so that I could understand myself better. And so, yeah, interpretations, assumptions, and judgments, so we question that fear, like how true is this, or maybe this is based from something in the past. And just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. And we have these, assumptions about how our future will look if we, aren't fearful and we just make a change, right? But we don't know that that's
true. Did you pick India for any specific reason, or you just picked it up?
Oh, yeah, India trip. So I had not done a lot of traveling, and my middle daughter she was a senior in high school at the time. She was going off to be an international relations major. So I knew that her life would involve a lot of travel internationally. And I just yearned to travel. And I literally just closed my eyes and picked that on a map. And I said, we're going to India.
How did it change your perspective in being kinder and compassionate? Because it's a complete cultural shock.
Oh, it was so amazing because in all honesty, right, I had such judgments. I was afraid. People would say to me, why are you going there? And I said, I don't know. And people would tell me, judgments, just like people have judgments about the United States. They'd be like, well, there's so many people and, you have to be careful the way women are treated. And there was all sorts of things that people were just spewing at me. And I would think like, how true is that? How do I know? How do you know? But I fell prey to that fear. And I remember getting off the airplane, which, you arrive in India in the middle of the night. And I remember stepping out in Delhi at the airport and just being overwhelmed. I mean, there were so many people there, and people were grabbing our luggage and yelling, and I was like, what am I doing? And, and our driver took us to the hotel, and they put mirrors under the cars, and they have machine guns, and it's very different than the United States. They're checking all the vehicles and things. And I thought, wow, this is really different. And what I have to tell you now, though, is so that this is really important. This is a pivotal part of my trip. So I remember that night getting to that hotel and thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Oh my gosh, I don't feel safe in this moment. And maybe all these things that people said are true. And oh my gosh, right? And I woke up the next morning and we had a driver take us back to the airport because we were driving, we would be flying from Delhi to the north. And I was telling the driver about our experience the night before, and he said, he looked in the rearview mirror and he said, you come as 2 women, but you stand as 1,000. You just find your voice. And so that is what I did in India. I found my voice, but I also opened myself up to a new culture and the beauty of that country and the beauty of the people that live there. And I was so grateful just to see different perspectives and to see a different way of life. And it just, I mean, there's nothing like experiencing a culture, going there to learn about that, because then you have less judgments about everything. You can just be like, oh, wow,
I hear you.
I want to go back. But it's on my bucket list to go back. So.
I want to ask you, is there any other thing that you have changed your beliefs about in the past few years?
Yes, I believe that we are in control of our own destiny, and that takes work. And the work is simpler than I ever thought. It's getting quiet. It's getting to know yourself. It's setting intentions and visions. It's believing in yourself and practicing affirmations. It's being fully present in the moment without expectations or judgments and just living life joyfully. And that opens up just a magical world.
So are you saying that sometimes just letting it go and not being too attached to your goals and outcomes?
Yes, you do the work for the work's sake.
And then let destiny or luck do its work.
The work is really what it's all about. I think so many people don't do the work, so they don't, take action towards a goal. What they do is that they sit back and they just hope and dream. And
this reminds me of Tony Robbins. He mentions that we got to do the work, we got to take action, we got to have goals, but there could be maybe 5% of luck, but we got to do the work. If you're not doing the work, there is a huge gap.
Absolutely. I think it's all intertwined, and it's a magical ingredients. They all have to kind of come into play in order to make the perfect cake, and that those ingredients are different for everybody. That's the beauty of it. Like one recipe does not fit all. Everybody's journey is different. You just have to tap into that inner truth and strength within, and you'll find your way.
Getting still, getting quiet, and finding peace in the chaos, finding calm in the chaos through different mindfulness practices, meditation, taking long walks, or doing something to get to your inner truth.
Absolutely.
Where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, so you can follow the Kindness Rocks Project on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter it's the Kindness Rock because there's not enough letters. And then the website is thekindnessrocksproject.com. And I'm also at Megan Murphy Coaching, but most of my content is on the Kindness Rocks Project. I just launched a coaching program, 6-week program online. It's Find and Calm in the Chaos and all of that. Now my coaching things have moved over to the Kindness Rocks Project. So
awesome. And we'll put all the information in the blog notes.
Great.
Awesome, Megan. So do you have any closing thought you want to share or say anything? It's a free floor for you.
Yeah, I guess I would just, remind each listener that we were all brought, I believe, that we were all brought into this lifetime for a very special reason. And I talk a lot about that with all the chaos in the world right now. We should feel honored and blessed that we're here because we are evolved souls or we wouldn't be here. And so we just need to see what our role is to create this new world, this new vision of a joyful world, a more peaceful world, a more, cohesive planet. And so, it's all up to us. It's up to us. So get quiet and find out what that is for you, because the world's waiting for your vision.
Amazing. And I would like to conclude by saying one of your favorite quote: one message at just the right time can change your entire day, outlook, and life. Thank you so much, Megan. It was amazing, kind, compassionate conversation with you.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a lovely hour to spend.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.